Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Concordia University of Chicago webinar, Fueling Excellence, How to Optimize Athletic Performance, Insights from NFL Insiders on Nutrition, Training, and Recovery. So welcome. And we'll be moving on to our agenda next. All right, so here's our lovely agenda for this evening. But before I get started on that, I ask everyone to please add your questions in the Q&A. So make sure you put those in there specifically in that part of the webinar. So today we're going to go over some really great introductions. And then we have two amazing speakers with us today, and they'll be going over improved performance, the athlete assessment, the athlete schedule, Fueling 101 for NFL players, nutrition to optimize recovery, and foundational supplements. So we've got a really great agenda going on tonight. All right, and so now on to some amazing introductions. All right, so I'm Sushma Amin, enrollment advisor here at Concordia University of Chicago. I'm here to basically guide students through their enrollment journey for our graduate programs. Very excited to help students. And I'm going to pass it on to Camille Blake.
Hello, everyone. I'm Camille Blake. I'm a student success coach here at Concordia University of Chicago. I work with the students as they work through their journey as they actually start the program.
Perfect. Thank you, Camille. And now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers. All right, so with us today, we have two amazing speakers. We've got Tavis Piattoly, and we also have Tom Zheng. So Tavis Piattoly, MS-RD LDN, he's been working in the field of high performance and sports nutrition for the past 22 years, designing personalized nutrition programs for high school, college, and professional athletes. He currently works at Omega Quant Labs and Fairchild Sports Performance, while he also serves as adjunct faculty for Concordia University of Chicago's Exercise Science Department. So Tavis is also the co-founder of two companies, My Sports Dietitian, as well as Liquid Fuel Nutrition. So he was also the sports dietitian for the New Orleans Saints from 2006 to 2013, and the New Orleans Pelicans from 2008 to 2013. He has also served as the sports dietitian for the Tulane Athletics from 2002 to 2014, and also the Tulane Institute of Sports Medicine's NFL Players Association Brain and Body Program from 2013 to 2016. So he has been very fortunate to work with a long list of NFL and MLB players throughout his career. So very excited to have you here, Tavis. And then Tom Zheng, Ph.Dc, MS, PES. Tom is an established health and sports scientist with a decade's experience ranging from professional sports to clinical settings. His health and performance career is highlighted by his stint as the performance therapist for the San Francisco 49ers, as well as a number of publications under his name. So Tom is currently the CEO of Adapt Health and Performance and president of Players Company, amongst other roles. So welcome, Tom. All right, so I'm going to be turning it over to Tavis and Tom now. So very excited to have you here.
Thanks, Shusma. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So what we want to talk about here on the nutrition side of things, we'll kick off kind of just really talking about the role of nutrition. What are really the key pillars? Because there's a lot of different things that improve performance. Performance is such a big word, right? So when we look at performance, there are a lot of factors for athletes that go into this process, right? Work ethic, The strength and conditioning program, an athlete has to have good genetics. They have to sleep, talent and skill. They go to practice. They do individual work. There's equipment and uniforms designed today to enhance performance. There's a lot of technology that we have access to that we didn't have 20 years ago. We didn't have a lot of the biomechanics and a lot of the software that we have where we can look at just about every type of key component of an athlete's movement. But the one thing that's still, to me, is the most critical piece of the performance puzzle that without this piece, the athlete truly can't reach optimal performance is their nutrition. Because really it all starts with your diet. I've seen some of the best athletes in the world. They were great athletes, became good athletes because their nutrition was not where it needed to be. They were either underfueled, poorly fueled, or just not optimizing with the right nutrient intake. So when we look at where does nutrition play a role for that athlete, we have a lot of data now where we look at athletes' body composition. So a lean muscle to fat ratio, that's something that's pretty critical for all position players, but especially you look at interior linemen, if they have a higher lean mass, that's going to give them obviously a lot more power and strength, especially trying to get that through the season. Lean muscle, that's a critical component, something we try to build in the off season. Muscle recovery, or just recovery in general, which recoveries, it contains several parts, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. But that's a critical piece. Is you want an athlete to feel good throughout the season. We know there's going to be bumps, bruises, injuries. You can't prevent those per se, but you could at least hopefully minimize some of that, or at least do things with an athlete from a nutrition standpoint that can help them recover a little faster, reduce inflammation, things like that. Illness risk. There's certain foods that have an immune system benefit and an anti-inflammatory benefit that can maybe minimize their risk for getting sick and keeping their immune system strong, because their immune system is going to be under a lot of stress going through, especially a full NFL or collegiate season. And then obviously everybody always wants to have more energy, and that's going to involve a lot of things. Hydration is going to play a role in that. Obviously adequate calories is going to play a big role in that, and as well as sleep. So that kind of covers this slide. So let's kind of talk about the athlete's assessment. What are some of the key pieces from a nutritional standpoint that I need data on before I can determine what are the next steps, right? Because in order for a sports dietitian to know, what do I need to do? I need specific amounts of data. I want the height, the weight. I want the body composition. Obviously, I'm going to ask an athlete what their goals are. If I'm working with a coach or a team or a position coach, we're going to kind of talk about what's realistic for that athlete. In the high school space, there's a lot of unrealistic goals that people typically have, even sometimes in the college space. In the NFL, it's a little bit more concise in the fact that these are athletes that are well conditioned. They've played for extended amounts of time. Even rookies, you're getting some of these rookies that have played 4, 5, 6 years of collegiate ball to where they've come through programs where they're very well educated. We want to get some medical history. I want to get some information about, is there anything they're allergic to, or do they take any medications that can impact nutrient interaction or impact or cause side effects? Are there any current medical issues that might be GI related or medical related, blood pressure related? And then there's also, we want to look at dietary supplement use. So I've had numerous athletes over the years in college and professional sports test positive for a banned substance because they purchased supplements at a supplement store, or they trusted the advice of the supplement store staff. And that can cause a problem. I mean, we see it every single year. Athletes are testing positive for things. And we've seen a couple of athletes already this year test positive for banned substances because they're just not listening to their staff. And then there's certain biomarkers, we want to get a complete metabolic panel. We want to look at liver function. We want to look at certain lipids. I'm not a big fan of total cholesterol. To me, it's fairly useless, but ApoB, lipoprotein little a, is much more important. Hormone panels, inflammatory markers like high sensitivity CRP. From a nutritional status, I want vitamin D. Omega-3 index is critical. That should be tested. Those two should be tested on every athlete. And then we want to look at things like stress, like cortisol, which is going to fluctuate throughout the year. And then blood and immunomarkers by getting a CBC. Also, the nutrition history. There's a lot of different things that we want to look at. I want to learn a little bit about their weight history. So if they're trying to gain or lose or just maybe maintain, have they had any recent fluctuations? Anything they've tried in the past? Any diets? Sometimes I've had athletes do crazy things. I don't work as much as I used to with pro athletes, but for many years working with athletes, especially on the major league side of baseball, athletes would try things like ketogenic diets in the season, which was like, wow, that's something that can significantly impact performance. You're going to have alcohol intake. If they win a game, these athletes are going to go out and celebrate, typically on a Sunday or a Saturday, depending on when they play. And there's going to be alcohol involved in some of these athletes. So we want to get an idea, can that impact their performance? And then questions about their eating history. When they're hungry, what do they do well? Where could they feel they could improve? Looking at their eating habits at the training table. So when I was with the Saints, I would visit with athletes. I would walk around, talk to athletes, see what their interests are, see what we can do to improve maybe the food options and food quality. Are there any habits, right? Habits is a key topic that I like to focus on, because are there any habits that's impacting them from reaching their goal? Do they have access to someone who can cook? Can they cook? Are they married? So there's a lot of different things that can go into that. And obviously the likes and dislikes are going to be important, because we want to know some athletes might not like any fruits and vegetables or any vegetables. And then we have to talk about why this is something that's pretty critical at this stage in your career. How important is it for you to last as long as you possibly can? And maybe trying new things and eating certain foods are going to be important for you to do that. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, habits, that's going to be a big thing, but we have to know that their schedule. The NFL is pretty nothing like NBA or Major League Baseball. I mean, when I was with the Pelicans and the Saints simultaneously, I was doing travel schedules and meals on the road, and Pelicans could be in a different city, every other day, or even like you fly into maybe Portland, and then you're going to Seattle, or then you're going to LA, and then you're going to Phoenix. Whereas the Saints, they leave on Saturday, play on Sunday, come back right after the game. So they're home 5-6 days a week, travel, or they're home a couple of weeks in a row if you plan at home a few times. So their schedule's a little bit easier, but that's an important thing that can impact what they eat and when they eat. Obviously, you want to know in the off season what their schedule is going to be to determine when they should be eating around a lot of different things. Off season's a little easier. Once camp starts in August, then it becomes very stressful, a lot more time, and they're pretty much on at a specific site for an extended period of time until camp breaks. So we have to get an idea of how many meetings they're going to be in, lifting schedule, when they have time to eat. So in many cases, it's write down what you eat for one or 2 days, so I can get an idea if I can't see them, if I wasn't at the facility, which most times I was not. I was a consultant, but I did go to training camp and was able to see a lot of things that happen. But that's where I can assess patterns, looking at maybe deficiencies. A lot of times it's gaps in eating where they're going maybe 5, 6, 7 hours because of time, maybe lack of preparation. Those are all things that can impact performance, impact energy, and also impact their recovery status. Next slide. So when we talk about the athlete's schedule, so as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of components that will dictate when and what they eat. We talked a little bit about this already, but really the key is, are they single? Are they married? Do they have a spouse, girlfriend, partner? That's really a critical component, because what I've learned with a lot of these athletes is if they're married and they have a spouse that likes to prepare their meals, or they have a chef, that makes their life a lot easier to stay on schedule. If they're single, then more than likely they're going to dine out more, especially if they don't have access to, or they don't have a lot of skill with cooking. We can keep it simple. I mean, we can teach them basic skills, but a lot of times I've seen athletes dine out more. Fast food was a big thing with certain athletes. A lot of those athletes didn't last very long because of the quality of their diet and their body weight they could not maintain where Coach Payton wanted them to maintain at that time. So that's an important thing when we look at this, is these are really specific factors that can determine when, what, and most importantly, how much they're eating. And that can determine if they're going to reach their goals or not. Next slide. So when we look at fueling strategies and some basic 101, what does that involve? The nutritional foundation, we have to make sure they get adequate calories, right? That's just so critical. We don't want athletes tracking their food. I don't want them using apps to try to log things. That is an exhaustive process, nor is it something they should be doing. Number one, it takes too much time. There are some pretty cool apps out there that do some neat things that coincide with the catering service or the training table that can print out meals. But we never want apps tracking athletes tracking this kind of stuff. Meal timing is also important. When they eat, to maintain blood glucose levels and steady energy. If they're going long periods of time between meals. That's not going to be good. It's going to be hard for them to meet their calorie goals. I don't want them fasting. In the off season, it's a little different. We can experiment with things, but most importantly, I want them developing an eating pattern and habit that they're going to do in the season, so their body's used to that. We don't want to get too crazy in trying anything, because this is not nutrition for body composition, meaning we're not eating for physique, we're eating for performance, and they're two different approaches. Adequate protein is critical. I typically like to go on the higher end. Anything more than a gram per pound doesn't get utilized for what it needs to be. So 80% to 100% body weight. Sometimes we want to push a little more, because more than likely they're not going to hit those numbers. It takes a pretty good amount of protein for some of these athletes to do that, unless they're doing some liquid and powders. Colorful fruits and veggies to build immunity and also to reduce some of the inflammation. Obviously, adequate hydration and electrolyte balance for muscle function and contraction. That's just an important thing, that especially in hot environments, as we start camp here in New Orleans, it was awful. So keeping some of these athletes hydrated can be a challenge. And then we want to limit alcohol as much as possible in the season. Sometimes that's hard to do, but when we talk about the side effects alcohol has on muscle recovery, brain health, it's just, there's really no benefit unless you're going to keep it in moderation. So what are some strategies to optimize recovery? What are some of the key pillars when we look at nutrition to help the recovery process? Now, the recovery process is not just like, it involves multiple factors, right? So when we look at recovery, part one is like refill the glycogen stores. That's your gas tank. Your gas tank's going to be empty a pretty good bit. Every time you're doing a 2 or 3 hour practice, an intense strength and conditioning session, we're using those glycogen and carbohydrate stores. So we want to fill that. That's one of the parts of recovery. Then we want to repair and regenerate muscle tissue. So post-workout nutrition, after post-workout nutrition and after practice is going to be key to get protein and carbohydrate in order to repair that gas tank, but also to repair muscle tissue after it's broken down. We also want to avoid chronic inflammation. Inflammation is going to happen. You can't avoid that. You can't prevent that, nor do you want to. It's part of the recovery process. But if an athlete's constantly beat up and they're constantly sore and they're constantly inflamed, then we got to look at why. Is it, are they eating pro-inflammatory foods, foods that are high in sugar, rich in omega-6 over and over again? Not that we can't have those. It's just, is their diet not well balanced? Are they not eating, at the facility as much as they should be? We want to restore phosphocreatine levels. So I'll talk about that when we talk about supplementation. And then we want to minimize the risk of injury as best as possible we can. Nutrition can only do so much, right? We see so many different things. I mean, we're doing a much better job. Concussions are significantly down by, I want to say, about 30 or 40% from years past. We still see a lot of ACLs. We still see a lot of Achilles, on a regular basis. We're seeing that. And the athletes are just bigger, stronger, faster than they've ever been. But something that we don't talk about, and a lot of teams are doing, is we want to optimize omega-3 levels to 8 to 12%. That is an important marker. And I'll get into that in supplementation, but 90% of Americans are deficient in omega-3. It's the world's biggest nutrient deficiency. And then we want to optimize vitamin D levels to 50 to 70 nanograms per deciliter. That's important for your immune health. That's important for your respiratory health. That's important for muscle recovery, but just muscle strength as well. And then finally, foundational supplements. What do I think are key critical things that athletes should be taking? And I'll kind of break these down into certain types of needs, right? What are the base foundation? Number one, before we do anything, we want to make sure it's certified for sport. If it's not NSF or Informed Sport, there's three certifying it, really four. The Australian Therapeutic Goods is by far the most rigorous, but that's not relevant here. But NSF and also Informed Sport are excellent certifications. They're considered the gold standard. So if a product is not certified by one of those organizations, athletes should not be taking it. If another company says, oh yeah, it is third-party tested, if it doesn't have this logo, it's not third-party tested. They may test it internally, but that doesn't mean anything. Multivitamin is just to maximize micronutrient needs. So there are a few brands I personally like that do a really nice job of using minerals that have optimized absorption, but a good multi if they're not eating a lot of fruits and vegetables. Omega-3, every athlete should be taking this year round. I mean, we should all be taking omega-3. Its triglyceride form is by far the best from an absorption. As I mentioned, it's the world's biggest nutrient deficiency at 80%, 90% of US. But for the athlete, it's protection in the brain. We have numerous studies that look at optimizing omega-3. When you have higher levels in your brain and blood, you reduce what's called neurofilament light. That's a marker of brain injury. You can't prevent that from happening, but those that have higher levels of omega-3 and even dose with at least a minimum of about 2 grams of DHA, their neurofilament light is significantly lower than those that were not. And they looked at college athletes over the course of an entire season, looked at brain activity, looked at markers of brain injury, and fed them throughout the season a certain amount of omega-3. And 2 grams protected their brain, although they saw a slight rise. Those starters that got the most playing time didn't have nearly as much of an increase. So that's why omega-3, it's also a natural anti-inflammatory. We're seeing studies in that where it's building muscle in older adults. So there's an anabolic effect to omega-3 as well. Vitamin D is another big deficiency. So from an immune, from a respiratory, from a joint and bone health, we want to optimize those levels. We've seen most athletes are going to be, I'd say probably 60 to 70% of NFL athletes, unless they're being supplemented with and tested, are going to be deficient. Tart cherry juice, great anti-inflammatory, also good for sleep because it naturally produces melatonin. And then I'm a big fan of curcumin, either the form of Mariva or Theracumin, because curcumin is not well absorbed. It doesn't pass the blood-brain barrier very well, doesn't get in your bloodstream very well unless there's certain forms created. This is a great anti-inflammatory. It's also very effective at improving brain health. And then the last slide, what are some things for strength and muscle growth and performance? Protein, we know we need adequate protein to build muscle. I mean, you have to be lifting weights. You have to have adequate calories. You can't be in a big, massive deficit and build muscle. It just doesn't happen that way. We've seen maybe a slight deficit, but really more maintenance and surplus where you want to build muscle, but adequate protein is critical. Whey is best, but all of these are going to work. It's not like whey is going to be that much more superior than some of the other forms. Some of the plant-based ones work really well. Creatine, another incredibly versatile nutrient. I think it's something people could be taking every day. We look at a new textbook by Dr. Rick Kreider, 500 pages just looking at multiple disease states. But from the athlete's perspective, it's a muscle recovery nutrient. It's a strength. It's a brain health. We're using this in the TBI, the traumatic brain injury, and the concussion world as well with omega-3. So 5 grams post-workout. And we still want to use monohydrate. Crea Pure, which is a German-based creatine, is the purest form of monohydrate. That's still the gold standard. It's not the HCLs. It's not all the other versions that are out there. Monohydrate still outperforms them. We talked about omega-3. That's still something I'm using as an anabolic nutrient as well now because it does increase protein synthesis. Beet powder, great for endurance, increases nitrates in blood flow. So I prefer that over citrulline. I prefer that. I'd recommend people use beets as their pre-workout, not some of the pre-workout supplements on the market that's going to cause too much vasoconstriction. This will cause vasodilation, so it'll increase your blood flow in your blood vessels, where all the pre-workouts with taurine and caffeine, they're going to cause constriction. That's not what you want pre-workout. Yes, it'll give you energy and focus, but it's going to constrict your vessels. You really want beets. And then magnesium, another common deficiency that has a lot of function around muscle control, muscle function. It's rarely measured, but bisglycinate is a great form to use at night. It can help with rest and anxiety and possibly sleep. And then citrate during the day. Also, citrate's good for just GI function as well. But make sure any type of supplement you use is certified for sport, especially if it's an athlete being tested.
Well, that was extremely well said, Tavis. Funny story, as you were talking about omega-3, I actually went and got my krill oil and took it off camera.
Nice.
So thank you. I appreciate you for that reminder. So I am going to chime in here and talk a little bit about training cycles and a lot of factors that attribute to the recovery of an athlete. Just to give a little background with the 49ers and particularly with the other clubs I've worked with, that is kind of been my bread and butter, was designing a recovery paradigm to, well, you can't really ever say mitigate injury risk, but to essentially see if we can mitigate the injury risk as well as develop a training paradigm that helps the athlete peak at the right level, right? So if you've worked with athletes or anybody in the field of competition, they are always ready to go. But the only difference between those that are, we can say, great and those that have unfortunate events is when do they peak? And ideally, that time is through the season. So with that, I'm going to segue a little bit into the training cycles. So what you see here is essentially what's called periodization, right? It breaks down the entire training cycle into a macro cycle, a large cycle. So that's usually a year, right? You can think of that as the entirety of an NFL season. A mesocycle, which is something that's a little bit smaller, think periodic quarters, something like that. So you can even segment that into a preseason, an off season, and a during season. And then microcycles that are about 1 to 4 weeks. It's a short training cycle, and they're usually aimed at developing a specific trait. Either it's strength, either it's power, either it's sport-specific skills, right? But all in all, every paradigm usually functions as well as its structure does. While you can kind of play around with this per sport, per athlete, whatever you want to do, at the end of the day, you want to make sure you have a complete diagram, which is your macro, and segues into what you're going to accomplish per quarter, which is your meso. And then think about what the specific skill and traits you need for a specific sport in your micro, and then tie it all together. Next slide, please. So we are going to segue a little bit into kind of the sport-specific side of things and delve into that a little bit. So this is a personal philosophy of mine. If you've been in the industry, you're going to run across a lot of different philosophies. Everybody's going to want to do things a certain way. And usually everyone's pretty gung-ho on that their strategy is the right way. And more often than not, you're going to have some supplemental supportive science that backs it up. But essentially what I personally like to do is break it down. We'll kind of throw that microcycle in here a little bit into phases. You want to start with a base phase, right? So that's your general movement where you think about what does this athlete actually have to do to be an athlete? At the end of the day, there's only so many shapes you're going to make as an athlete. So it's really not that different from, let's just say, rugby to basketball. At the end of the day, you're kind of getting in a stance, you're sprinting, you're decelerating, you're moving laterally. So those general movements are the first set of the base that you want to train, right? Because if you can't decelerate, dude, you're probably going to tear your ACL. If you can't move laterally, you might strain a groin, right? If you can't land appropriately, you might roll an ankle. So during the base phase, you want to really work on those general movement principles. Next, you want to emphasize the dynamic movement that is associated with said sport. So you narrow your scope down a little bit. So we'll use football, for example. The great thing about football is you get a plethora of different positions, a plethora of different body types, and a plethora of different positional demands. So as you're going through the dynamic movement portion of it as it relates to this player's position, you're going to train an offensive lineman, which is a 300-pound individual who moves around in a 4x4 box, a lot differently than you're going to train a defensive back who is going to be backpedaling and basically spans a large majority of the field. So you're going to work on the tensile capabilities of their muscles for either an endurance perspective, an output perspective, or just basically positionally demand, right? Next, you're going to start kind of generating a power phase of exacerbating and kind of, exacerbating or elaborating on those specific traits. Like for that defensive back who has to backpedal to keep up with the receiver, you're going to be training a multitude of different speed qualities in different planes, right? With any proper training cycle, you always kind of want a deload or tapering phase. So the cool thing about training is, and I'm just going to wrap that microcycle in here. So think of it like a 4-week cycle. First 3 weeks, you gradually increase the intensity, you build the muscle capability, right? That 4th week, you can take that off. I know some of you might disagree with me, but you can take that 4th week off. The cool thing about the adaptation for your body is if you completed the training volume and load in those 3 weeks, more often than not, you're actually not losing any of those trained skills or traits in that last week. In fact, you're giving your body ample time to kind of recover, adapt to this new range of movement, this new potential, and then that'll actually help your next phase, and it kind of builds on itself like a block. No questions? Next slide, please. So I'm just going to broaden it a little bit, and this specifically, I'm going to use football, for example, as a more direct training phase description. What I mean by that is I got this model from NASM through my PES certification, which actually I got after I got my master's from Concordia University. Real cool. Essentially, it breaks it down into 5 different phases, where the 5th phase is that power phase. So think of that peak phase, right? So phase 1 is the stabilization or the endurance phase. I generally like to apply this in the off season when you have a little bit of time, and what you're really working on is just the athlete's ability to move, to feel good, and to perform rudimentary tasks like balance. Hence stabilization, because if you've ever worked with a professional football or any athlete, really, they're at a pretty high propensity to have a muscular imbalance. So during the stabilization phase, that's what you're really trying to figure out and fix before they move on to a strength endurance phase, where you're doing high repetitions, moderate to low volume, and all this is doing is building muscle potential as well as capacity to be able to, you probably guessed it, have endurance and still be strong. Phase 3 is muscular development. So a lot of you might know this as the hypertrophy phase, where it's the phase of making your muscles get bigger, right? So the cross-sectional area of a muscle is trained. It's usually lower reps, significantly higher load or higher weight, so that you create those micro tears, and over a 4 to 8 week cycle, those things get huge, and you're able to kind of get into that max strength phase, where you're doing really low reps and very high weight, right? So you're trying to max out on the strength, because that's going to help you go to phase 5, which is power. So power usually refers to the elasticity and the ability to create torque. What I mean by that is max strength, think of it like a huge squat. Power, think of it like a jump, because you're creating that pop, right? Which you need for every single sport, except maybe golf. Actually, no, you still have to hit the ball, so you do need torque. We can hop on to the next slide, please. This is a very cool one. So I don't know how everybody feels about sleep. I personally love it. I honestly think it is the best, if not the top 2 best recovery tools you're ever going to find. Every human being on earth needs sleep. Particularly deep sleep is the most restorative sleep. And I'm just going to go back to that a little bit after I go through this diagram, as well as give a brief overscope. So sleep is generally a 90-minute cycle when you are going to bed at night from, let's say, 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 8-hour cycle. Usually you cycle through 90-minute cycles of sleep, right? So in the diagram, you're going to see that there are 4 stages of sleep. The first 3 refer to non-REM sleep, and the last one refers to REM. Generally, as you go to sleep, the non-REM side of it is going to take a gross majority of those 90 minutes. So it might be 70 minutes, but every concurring 90-minute cycle as you sleep, as you get to that wakefulness, REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, is going to take a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. So by the end of it, that last cycle you're going to get, it might be 45 minutes to 45 minutes, right? So I'm going to simplify this extremely and just break it down to non-REM and REM sleep. So the reason your body does that is because you really want to wake up while you're in that REM-REM cycle, because if you don't, you're going to feel really cranky and really groggy. So I've personally done that at least 5 times this week, where I've woken up and I'm like, darn, I don't feel very happy until I've had some coffee or walked around or looked at some sunshine, right? It's because my 3-year-old woke me up at 6 a.m. because she loves to do that. And I was most likely not in REM sleep. So the reason you want to wake up in REM sleep is because during REM sleep, you're actually getting a shot of cortisol, right? Your brain is now firing a lot of alpha and gamma waves, not rays, and it's stimulating a wake cycle. Whereas in non-REM sleep, you're actually stimulating more sleepy cycle. So that's why you wake up sleepy if you're not in REM sleep. But both sleep cycles or both sleep categories have their own benefit. Deep sleep is, like I mentioned, the most restorative sleep of all. You actually get physical restoration while you're in it, which means all of the damage you've done training, a gross majority of it is healing while you're in those deep sleep cycles. You're getting memory consolidation where short-term memory is turned into long-term memory. So if you're studying for a test or if you're studying for your CSCS, whatever it may be, it really behooves you to get some good quality deep sleep. One of the things that are the most interesting points is brain detoxification during that deep sleep cycle. What actually happens is, let's see how do I put this. So the way your body communicates via your nervous system is you have an axon, you have another axon. Think one end, another end. It has a lot of chemical messengers in between, and that's how your body communicates through your nervous system. Well, throughout the day, a lot of those things in between get gunked up, right? They kind of block the pathways. It's like a horrible, traffic on the highway. So during that deep sleep cycle, your body's actually clearing that highway, clearing that cycle so that your brain can function better when you wake up. That's why if you've ever not slept for about 3 days, you can't remember anything because none of those axons are working. A couple of different things as well as it helps with emotional processing, hormonal regulation, as well as in that deep sleep cycle because you are at the most peaceful, your pulse is low, respiratory rate is low, you're at a deep energy conservation state, which is why you don't really get hungry while you sleep. So just a couple of differentiating factors for the REM sleep. Like I mentioned, you're actually getting some stimulation while you're in that cycle. You still are getting some memory consolidation, some emotional regulation, some physical recovery, though not as much as the deep sleep. One of the most unique things about REM sleep is the dreaming state. You only dream you're in REM sleep. So if you've ever, now think about it, if you've ever woken up in the middle of a dream, like shot wide awake, you're usually pretty darn awake. That's because you're in REM sleep. So that's just a little funny thing about sleep. So with that being said, sleep cycles are very important. And as Tavis mentioned previously, it is kind of a gateway to your recovery, as well as how you eat and how you time your food definitely has an impact on your circadian rhythm, which impacts your sleep cycle. So it would behoove any athlete to at least get 8 hours of sleep. Try to not get any blue light exposure. I know phones are terrible, laptops are terrible. I know. You can wear glasses for that though. But anyways, set yourself up for success. Try to have as little stimulation as possible so that you can get into that deep sleep right away. All right, I'll stop talking about sleep now. Next one, please. Cool. Okay, this is not the stages of sleep. This is actually your nervous system. So this is going to be the last little topic we're going to cover on recovery because Tavis did such a great job on nutrition and I just talked about sleep. Your nervous system impacts a lot in your body. It impacts your stress response, directly correlates to sleep quality, has a huge effect on inflammation and immune function, based on the hormonal regulation aspect, directly impacts their muscle recovery, so the anabolic process, as well as, which is coming a lot more to light, particularly in sports, the mental well-being. So the nervous system breaks down really into two separate segues, right? Parasympathetic, so think of your rest and digest. Sympathetic, think of your shoot, I'm ready to go, right? When an athlete is gearing up for competition, you really don't want them in parasympathetic, right? Because then you're groggy. You're like, dude, I got to walk up to the field. I really don't want to do this. Versus when they're about to go to sleep, you don't want them in sympathetic. You don't want them ready to go to not sleep, right? So there's a couple of different things that you really want to take into account when you're kind of propagating this with an athlete. Pre-workout is a phenomenal example, right? You take pre-workout and the molecules in there essentially stimulate a lot of a sympathetic response. It stimulates vasoconstriction in your blood vessels. Excuse me. It basically stimulates your awake cycle. It stimulates a lot of different things. So with that being said, I think timing for a lot of things, particularly if you're talking about the NBA schedule is way worse, but we'll use the NFL schedule, for example. You really want to time the amount of stressors that is kind of shot off to your athletes. And there's a variety of factors that attribute to it, like family, like your position on the depth chart, like your overall eating habits, sleeping habits, training habits. So as a professional, I'm not saying you be their guru. I'm just saying it's a good practice to understand your athlete as a person, figure out what makes them tick, and see if you can give them just constructive advice on how to regulate their own nervous system. For example, don't drink coffee when it's 8 p.m. Please don't do that. Not great. Just from a clinical and a scientific side, the state of the nervous system has an increase in the probability of injury occurrences generally in athletes. Now, negative life events don't directly increase the probability in one instance case, but research has shown that changes between a certain time point or a consecutive amount of negative life events actually does increase the probability of injury. What I mean by that is if you had like 7 bad things happen, you're probably not going to be feeling great. You're probably not going to be sleeping great. You're probably not going to be eating great, which changes muscular elasticity, which puts you at a greater risk for non-contact injuries or soft tissues. So that is why regulating and figuring out kind of all of these stressors for your athlete is a huge portion of their recovery process. That's all I got.
All right. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Tavis. Very informative. Lots of great information there. So next, I want to definitely cover some program details. But before I do that, I'd like to check in with Camille to see if anybody has any questions for Tom or for Tavis.
Yeah, we do have a question from Melissa. She asked Tom, do you ever recommend acupuncture to your athletes to help with sympathetic or parasympathetic balancing and regulation, either pre-event or post-event?
100%. I generally don't recommend acupuncture. I don't recommend anything that can cause a relaxation of tissues too much prior to an event because that changes the power output capability. But post-event, I am a huge fan of having acupuncture kind of at the focal point in your temple, as well as certain other points to stimulate that parasympathetic activation as you're kind of going into that sleep cycle. A lot of the times, if I know somebody or like an athlete, not even an athlete, anybody, if they have problems sleeping, I do often recommend if they're not afraid of needles, of course, they do go through that kind of acupuncture process, and a good chunk of it helps, but there are always with anything select individuals where it doesn't.
All right, great question. Any more questions out there, Camille?
Let me check real quick. I'm not sure if it's a question. It is a comment. It's amazing for pre-event also. I'm biased because I'm an acupuncturist and I work with the NFL. I have to teach a class at 8 though, so I have to leave in a second.
Nice. I didn't say it was actually, no. I take it back. Yes, it's good for pre-event if done the right way, much like everything else.
All right, good deal. So I think it's a great time to move on to some program details. So next slide, please. All right. So
oh, sorry. I just saw another
okay.
comment from John.
Oh,
I do see that. Yes. John asks, what about RPR for pre or post event?
Who is that directed towards?
I believe that would be I'm
I'm not sure.
I'm
what
not
RPR
sure. I
is.
believe
Yeah, can you
Tavis, if you want to
elaborate on
take that one.
RPR?
Yes.
All right. Any other comments or questions for Tom or Tavis?
John, just RPR, reflexive aid performance reset. Reflexive performance reset.
I'm going to be perfectly honest here. I'm not too familiar with that. So I'm going to shoot it over to Tavis if he is.
No, yeah, I've never heard that term before.
Same. John, you're going to have to tell us about that. Sounds interesting.
John, if you want to leave that comment in there and I can forward it over to Tom and Tavis post webinar, and then if they want to get more into that with you, they can.
All right. Any more questions or comments
No, I don't
before
see
we
any
move
more.
on? All right, great. So program details. So the program that we have is a Master of Science in Applied Exercise Science program. So this program has a total of 5 concentrations that you can choose from. So these 5 concentrations include exercise physiology, human movement science. We've also got sports nutrition, and then sports performance training and strength and conditioning. So for those individuals who are looking to work with professional sports teams, the best 2 concentrations for that would be sports performance training and or the strength and conditioning. So those are our concentrations. So next slide, please. So in addition to this master's degree, we also have 4 graduate certificate programs. So the 4 graduate certificate programs are sports nutrition, and this one prepares you for the Certified Sports Nutritionist exam and certification through ISSN. We also have the graduate level Human Movement Science Certificate, which prepares you for the Corrective Exercise Specialist exam and certification through NASM. There's also the Sports Performance Training Certificate. This prepares you for the Performance Enhancement Specialist exam and certification, also through NASM. And then there's the Strength and Conditioning Certificate. So that prepares students for the Certified Strength and Conditioning Specialist exam and certification through the NSCA, and also Certified Personal Trainer exam and certification through NSCA. So those are our 4 graduate level certificates. So career outcomes. I'm sure everybody's really interested in hearing about career outcomes with the degree. So for the master's program, the most popular career outcomes are exercise physiologist. We also have an athletic director and performance coach. And for our doctorate program, now this is our Ph.D. in exercise science program. So some career outcomes for that are higher education, research scientists, and physical health policy advocates. So lots of great career outcomes there. Now, as far as program format, the programs are 100% online. No campus visits required. You're not required to come to campus in River Forest, Illinois for anything. Anywhere, anytime education. So our classes are asynchronous. So no set login days or times that are required. You'll have a syllabus with a deadline for your assignments each week that you'll have to make sure that you pay attention to. Another really great part of our programs are that we do have small class sizes. So there are approximately 20 students per class. And then for our master's program, you're looking at 10 courses. Each one is 8 weeks long. And then for our doctorate program, you're looking at 20 courses, also 8 weeks, 8 weeks long each. So really good information as far as program format. And then something that's really important is you want to figure out how you're going to finance your education. So for our master's and graduate certificate programs, you're looking at $593 per credit hour. Each course is 3 credits. That includes a technology fee of $18 per credit hour. $17,790 for the entire program, plus an estimated $800 for textbooks. And then as far as PhD tuition, you're looking at $793 per credit hour, which includes an $18 per credit hour technology fee. So it comes out to approximately $56,217 for the entire program, and that includes an estimated $1,500 for books. And then we do have monthly payment plans that you can take advantage of. You can just contact our business office and they'll guide you through setting those up. And then we do have a really great financial aid office. They're basically here to assist with, finishing processing your FAFSA application. And then there's a really good link there for studentaid.gov. Lots of good resources there. And then if you're completing FAFSA, there's our FAFSA code 001666. So that's financing your education. And looks like Tom has a question.
No, I just looked up John's question real quick. Reflexive performance reset, and I just thought I'd answer it since it's super quick. So essentially all it is using breathing techniques to regulate your sympathetic system. Love it. I just don't know the name, but I use it every day. Sorry about that.
That's okay, no problem at all. And I wanted to ask Tavis or Tom if you wanted to add anything about the programs that you teach or that you've enrolled in.
Yeah, I mean, I teach 2 courses, or it's one every 8 weeks is a different course. So I'm under the sports nutrition concentration. I do a vitamins and minerals course. I've been teaching that for 6 years, as well as going on right now. It's exercise and nutrition for weight management. So those are all 8-week courses. They're excellent. They're a lot of fun. But yeah, we're about to start our next 8 weeks is coming up. I think we just started module 4, or week 7 this week with the current course, and that'll end after the end of next week, and then we'll go right into the next section.
All right, sounds great. Thanks so much for that.
I would double what Tavis said. Personally, going through the coursework, it's been very enjoyable. And one of the biggest things of being a professional that has worked an interesting schedule, it's very form-fitting to your schedule and it's very attainable. So don't let that be a deterrent.
All right, good deal. Thank you. All right.
I'd like to piggyback on that. I hear great things, Tavis, from your students. So always hold you in high regard and get a lot of great feedback from your classes.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good deal. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so I'm sure everyone's wondering, what are the application requirements? What do we need from you? When I talk to a lot of prospective students on the phone, they are very excited when I tell them that we do not require the GRE or the MAT. And so basically, we do have an online application for admission. It's probably going to be the shortest and quickest online application for admission you've ever filled out. And it's also free to apply. We don't have an application fee. So you're looking at less than 5 minutes to complete that application. And your enrollment advisor can definitely walk you through that and guide you through applying for admission. But for our master's degree program and our graduate level certificates, we do require completion of a bachelor's degree from a regionally accredited school. And that bachelor's degree can really be in any subject area. For our doctorate students, so for the Ph.D. in exercise science program, we are looking for completion of a master's degree. And you want to definitely connect with your enrollment advisor to discuss what types of master's degrees are approved for admission to that program. But as far as GPA requirements for master's and the graduate certificate students, we're looking for a GPA of 2.85 or higher for standard admission. For our doctorate students, for PhD in exercise science, looking for GPA of a 3.0 or higher. And so as far as documents are concerned, we do require official transcripts that must come directly from your prior colleges or universities, sent directly to CUC. We also require 2 letters of recommendation, and they have to be academic or professional. We're also requiring a professional goal statement. So your enrollment advisor might refer to that as an objective statement. It's basically your admissions essay, letter of intent. And then for our doctorate students only, we do require a writing sample, and it cannot be more than 5 pages long. So want to cut it off at 5. And then also for our doctorate students, we do require a current resume or CV. So those are all of the application requirements and document requirements for our program. So, all right, next slide. So next steps, everybody's probably wondering what the next steps are. Reach out to your enrollment specialist to complete your application. So my contact information is right there. That's my direct phone number and my email address. And then, so what you want to do basically is get that application for admission in. You want to make sure you get that completed and then start immediately requesting all of your documents. We do have, application completion deadlines and document deadlines as well. So again, your enrollment advisor will definitely give you that information and keep you on track with that. And then if you are accepted, into the program, an exciting thing will take place where we will guide you through course registration, and you'll definitely watch an orientation video as well. And then we will be posting the link to apply in the Q&A. So that's coming up really quick. Our next set of classes do start on October 23rd. So that's right around the corner. Good news is we're still accepting applications for that start. So there's still time. And then there's a really good link there if you want to check out all the programs on our website. So those are the next steps. All right. So Camille, does anybody have any questions about program details?
I don't have any at the moment.
Okay.
No, I don't see any. Sounds like you've done a great job, Sushma, in getting them all the information.
All right, that's what I do, definitely. And we'll also be posting a link in the Q&A to book a call with an enrollment specialist. So if you want to get connected to somebody real quick, go ahead and book that appointment. All right, so if there isn't anything else, I definitely want to thank everyone for attending our webinar this evening. And definitely we hope to connect with you again soon. So take care, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.